I'm not sure if you noticed this, but Andre's Zelda Breath of the Wild analysis is long. Like, really long. So long that it's probably hard for some of you to even sit down and watch it all in one sitting. But we're here to help by making it all just a little bit more manageable and breaking up the analysis into multiple parts. In this excerpt, we look at the game's physics, weather patterns, using stealth on enemies, the Koroks, and more. Take it away, Andre.
Now, what makes most of these ruins possible, as well as much else about Breath of the Wild, is the game's spiffy new physics engine. As in, it's everywhere, and it introduces subtleties and gameplay possibilities that Zelda fans have never had to think about before, such as how trees can now organically be used to solve puzzles, whether it's cutting one down and floating it down a river to use as a platform, or carefully chopping down another in the right direction so that it falls across a gap, creating a bridge. And even then, the tree isn't fully stable, so you'll have to be careful the Link's weight doesn't cause it to roll away from underneath you. Oh, and if you screw up entirely, you might be out of luck, at least until those trees grow back, which Nintendo assured us that they would at E3, they just didn't specify how long that might take. Although we did notice that there might be a way to cheat the system, since the tree here did come back immediately after Link got a game over. Well, I guess Link always has been one to manipulate time to his advantage. Now, another example of the physics shows up with boulders that you'll occasionally find, often placed precariously on a ledge right over an enemy camp. But before you push it off, you might want to take into account how the terrain will affect the boulder's path. And yeah, this goes for round bombs too. But it's not just the terrain you'll have to take into account, but wind too. Now, we haven't seen too many examples of this yet, but there is an area of the plateau that features a strong gust of wind blowing at all times. And not only does it affect the foliage, like the grass here, but even the fire and its smoke too. And it's not just for looks, as it'll even affect Link too, blowing a bomb right out of his hands. Yeah, the wind here kinda blows. Then we have fire and its physics. Now, although you'll find several campfires throughout the plateau, you can also make your own wherever you want, as long as you have firewood and flint. Just drop the flint and strike it with a metal object like a sword to create a spark, and as long as you have some wood nearby, it'll ignite. And that fire can spread onto other wooden objects too, like sticks, bows, or even barrels. Although larger objects like barrels will take a little bit longer to catch on fire. Oh, and if you're carrying fire around with you, like on a torch, you can ignite bushes or grass too, but it does tend to fizzle out pretty quickly. Unless you're in an area with a lot of dry grass, like in that same windy area. The conditions here are perfect for the fire to spread, which can result in a mini wild forest fire, which can be especially useful if you want to get some hang time with your glider. You can even use the physics to create some rudimentary simple machines. For instance, as the guys over at Nintendo Sphere discovered, if you position a plank over an object like a chest to use as a pivot, then place something on one side of the plank like Link, and then drop a heavy object on the other, well, you just created yourself a catapult that can launch Link sky high. Pretty impressive, right? And we're just scratching the surface of things that you can do with the physics in the game, as we're pretty sure there'll be many other crazy things that you can do, whether or not the developers intended for it. The physics really add yet another wild element in the game which makes it feel more real than ever before. And something else that helps make the world feel alive is the varying climate and weather patterns. Now, in the E3 demo, we only really got a taste of the former, with snow found in the higher mountain elevations. And as part of the game's attention to realism, the temperature not only drops the higher up you go, but it will drop even farther at night. In fact, temperature plays a rather large role in the game, as reflected in the fact it gets its own on-screen temperature gauge, which visibly catches on fire if Link's on fire, or freezes over when Link's frozen. And speaking of which, there are a few ways to combat the cold, but the most effective method is, of course, to wear warm clothing. And articles that are especially cold resistant are marked on the inventory screen. But besides clothing, some food, like the spicy elixir, will temporarily increase Link's resistance to the cold, which in this case is for 9 minutes and 50 seconds. But failing that, Link can also make a fire too, which will keep him warm as long as he stays close. Now, climates are one thing, but weather is another, because what's sunny one moment might be rainy the next. Now again, we didn't see any examples of this in the E3 demo, but the trailer does show at least one example, with a scene of the Temple of Time on a dark and stormy night, which is of course in stark contrast to its appearance in the demo. It's then followed by this scene of the nearby forest where lightning strikes a tree and starts a fire, which seems like it might be another hazard for Link to watch out for. And in another scene, we can see lightning strike a structure here that it possibly destroys. Now in both instances, the lightning appears to be striking taller objects, much like it does in real life. And like in real life, the time of day changes too. Yeah, that really is the best transition I could think of. Hey, I've been working on this for a couple of months, okay? Cut me some slack. Now, granted, day and night cycles are nothing new for Zelda, but Breath of the Wild features one of the longest ones yet, clocking in at 24 minutes in total, which is to say that for every minute of our time, 1 hour passes in Zelda. And for the first time, so to speak, the game displays the exact time digitally in the lower right corner, albeit in 5-minute increments. But interestingly, that clock disappears when you enter a shrine. But don't let that fool you, because time still continues to pass at the exact same rate. Yep, we measured it. So I guess shrines are basically the casinos of Hyrule, in that they're windowless and you have no idea how much time has passed until you step back outside. And in case you did lose track of time, don't worry, because you can always just stop at a campfire to fast forward time to morning, noon, or night. And in case you were wondering what a full day looks like, the Japanese website for Breath of the Wild actually revealed a full 24-minute video of the entire day and night cycle, which we sped up here. And it provides a wonderful look at how things change over the course of a day, such as the color of the sky, shadows that move with the sun's position, fog that comes and goes, and even the clouds can be seen changing direction with the wind. That's attention to detail. But this video has a couple of other interesting things about it too. For one, shortly after night falls, what appears to be a meteorite flies in and crashes into the ground, kicking up quite a lot of dirt in the process. And in a neat touch, you can even see it reflected in the water as it comes crashing in. But it seems this isn't just for show, because a beacon of light shines at the impact point, suggesting there's something there for Link to find. Maybe some kind of valuable material? But interestingly, it seems like Link may have a limited amount of time to find it, because that beacon of light disappears just a little over 5.5 minutes later. So is it on a set time limit? Or does its disappearance perhaps correlate with the rising sun, which happens mere moments later? Regardless, we wonder if the meteorite might possibly hint at a greater celestial theme to the game. After all, those lighted circle and line patterns we talked about before do also somewhat resemble constellation drawings. And going off this potentially wild idea, let's take a look at the outside of the shrines again, where the base of it appears to be more Earth-like in appearance, whereas we can see the constellation-like line pattern at the top, closer to the stars. And could the towers perhaps been built as a way to get closer to the star-filled sky, kind of like the biblical Tower of Babel? Hey, we're just throwing out ideas, okay? And speaking of celestial themes, did you notice a moon here? Or rather, how it's only a partial moon, a waxing crescent to be specific? Well, we know the moon won't always appear that way based on this scene in the trailer, which appears to show one closer to a 3/4 moon, which means that the moon phases from Wind Waker are back. Now in that game, it affected various events, like the location of the ghost ship, so we think it might have some kind of effect on the gameplay this time too, we're just not sure what. Okay, so by now it should be pretty clear that the world in Breath of the Wild feels alive. Again, it all ties back into the wildness of it all. And something else that helps with this is the fact that it's teeming with life, whether it's a vast amount of plants and foliage to be found, or all kinds of wildlife. I mean, you'll find squirrels squirreling up and down trees, fish in bodies of water, boars and deer in forests, and all kinds of birds. You'll often even see them flying around in the sky in a V formation, which is a neat touch. And of course, you can hunt any of them if you so choose too. You can even go bug hunting if you want, like in Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword. Heck, even the enemies feel more natural than ever before, because they now feel like an actual part of the world. In the plateau, for instance, bokoblins are the most frequent antagonists, which isn't really anything new for Zelda, but this time they seem to actually exist as part of this world, as you'll mostly find them living as groups inside different types of encampments. It might be a small camp with a fire roasting meat, or something as grandiose as setting up home inside a giant skull. By contextualizing the enemy's existence, it really makes this feel like more of a world, while also making the bokoblins feel a little bit smarter than they typically have. In fact, they not only seem smarter, but they actually are smarter. And this plays into Breath of the Wild's newfound emphasis on stealth, which we touched on a bit earlier with the wild horses. Because Link now has the ability to crouch to stay out of sight, and an on-screen meter even shows how much sound Link is making, which are both features brand new to the Zelda series. Okay, I guess you could crouch in Zelda too, but we don't really count that, do we? And if Link manages to sneak up on the enemy sight unseen, he can perform a sneak strike that appears to be an instant kill, at least for the bokoblins here. And that's a technique that's especially useful at night, when you can sneak up on the sleeping camp to take them all down before they even know what's happening to them. But sneaking up on bokoblins is easier said than done, because if Link's not careful, he'll arouse their suspicion, as indicated by the question marks that appear over their head, and they'll begin to investigate immediately. But you can use their newfound intelligence against them too, such as by distracting them with the sound of a misplaced arrow or an exploding bomb to lure them away, which gives Link a chance to get into a better position and pick them off. But things can get even trickier when you factor in the ones in the watchtowers who will sound their horns if they see you, instantly alerting the others to your presence. And speaking of which, the bokoblins actually see or discover Link at any point, then an exclamation mark will appear over their heads, showing that they're in attack mode. And this is where we can see how clever they really can be. Because, even though they almost always start unarmed since they're just chilling at camp, as soon as they learn of a threat, they'll actually run over to their weapon stash and arm themselves, potentially including shields too. And some even go the extra mile of igniting their clubs by dipping it into fire, making them even more of a danger. So basically, the longer you take, the greater the threat they pose, which makes sneaking up on them and taking them all out quickly all the more important. Ultimately, the bokoblin's IQ bump really turns every camp into a mini puzzle of sorts, giving you a ton of options. What angle is best to approach from? Do you try to sneak up and take them down all silently, or attack from afar? Or do you try and steal or burn all their weapons instead? Or heck, if there's a beehive nearby, you can try shooting that down instead and letting the bees have their fun. And that's just a small amount of the possibilities. And it seems like you'll have plenty of opportunities to exercise your options, since bogoblins appear to be pretty common enemies even outside of the plateau, as we can see them also appear in a desert setting and on horseback in the field leading up to Hyrule Castle. But even though bogoblins may be smart, relatively speaking, the typical red ones aren't terribly strong. But there is a rarer blue variety as well, who has a lot more HP and is also equipped with better weapons, like a sword instead of a wooden club. Now in Skyward Sword, the bogoblins wore skulls as accessories, but this time it's turned into a full-on obsession, as not only do they wear mini skulls around their necks, but they also use bones as support beams for their structures, with random piles of bones also found nearby for good measure. And as we touched on before, they even live inside giant skulls at times. And speaking of which, those skulls really are huge. What kind of creature did it come from? And could that creature still exist in this world? Or is it too a relic of the past? And speaking of relics from the past, another enemy seen in the plateau are the very skeletons of the bogoblins you're fighting, called skull bogoblins. Huh, so maybe this explains why the bogoblins are so fascinated with skeletons. Okay, now these guys only appear at night, burrowing up from underground, meaning you'll have to keep on your toes since you never know when one might attack. But given their fragile nature, they'll actually fall apart as you battle them. They might lose an arm, or even their head. Yep, you could say Link really pulled ahead in that battle. But even when detached, the body parts and bodies will attempt to reunite, although they're not too picky about whose body they reattach to. Now if Link gets to one of those body parts first, he can actually use them as weapons himself. The arm can be equipped like a sword, even as it creepily wiggles around, or he can punt the head like a football to inflict some damage from a distance. Yeah, it's a little messed up. Now while bogoblins and skull bogoblins will account for most of your enemy encounters, there are a couple of other dangerous creatures lurking out in the plateau, such as choo-choos, which can also suddenly pop up from the ground. And then there's also Zelda's famous bat enemy, Keese. Now both enemies are usually pretty weak, but they both do come in an ice variety found in the snowy mountain that can freeze Link on impact, which makes them both just a little bit more dangerous. And based on the ice versions, we'd be very surprised if fire variants don't show up too, especially for Keese since they've already appeared in that form in past games. Now in the case of choo-choos, they always seem to drop choo-choo jelly after being defeated. And the description for the normal one's a bit interesting, because it states that although it's unusable in its current gelatinous state, applying electricity may change its form, which suggests that Link may be able to come across sources of electricity in the environment, similar to fire and how it interacts with nearby objects. And by electricity, do they mean the blue energy we've already talked about ad nauseum? If that's the case, maybe Link can use his energized arrows to have the same effect. Anyways, that covers it for all the common enemies found in the plateau, but there is one more encounter we haven't talked about yet, and it's a big one. Although it may not seem like it at first because he's completely hidden. It's only when you step into the clearing here that the rocks magically group together, forming a giant rock monster, called the Steppe Talus. Which is a rather fitting name considering that steppe is defined as an extensive plain, especially one without trees, and talus refers to a deposit formed by an accumulation of broken rock debris. At any rate, the game treats this as a major encounter, perhaps even a boss encounter given that's the only enemy to have its name displayed on screen at all times, along with a giant health bar. But seeing as it is a giant rock monster, how do you attack it? After all, in the words of Tim Allen,
rock, it doesn't have any vulnerable spots!
But thankfully, this one actually does have a weak point. It's that black rock on top of its head, or what we think is its head. It's just getting to it that can be tricky, since Link needs to get close enough to climb up its body while avoiding being pounded by its swinging fists, which it can also throw as projectiles. And it's not like he can run out of them either, since he can just dig up another rock as a replacement. There is a pretty useful trick though, because if you're quick, you can actually hop aboard at the very start as he's assembling himself to get some easy hits in. Now you can also attack his weak point from afar with arrows, and bomb arrows seem especially effective in particular. And as a bonus, arrows will actually stun the creature momentarily, giving Link a good opportunity to get close and climb him without fear. Just be aware they may toss Link off after a few direct hits. Now once you finally defeat him, Link will be rewarded with a bunch of amber and a valuable ruby. Alright, and that covers it for all the creatures we can see in the plateau. But what about those that we can't see? Because there's still one more left that we haven't talked about yet. The Koroks. And that's for a good reason, because these guys are invisible until you happen to cross their hiding spot, at which point they'll instantly materialize and express how surprised they are that Link can see them. Now Koroks, as a species, are nothing new, having previously appeared in the Wind Waker, but they haven't been seen since until now. And as it turns out, the Koroks this time aren't just any Koroks, they're the exact same Koroks. Or at least that's the case for the 5 we've seen so far, which includes Oaken, who's in a pond, Hollow, who's hiding under a rock in the forest, Aldo, who lurks on top of the Temple of Time, Olivio on top of the woodcutter's cabin, and Urch under this distinctive tree in the forest. And their reappearance seems particularly apt in a game all about nature, given that they're made of wood, have leaves for faces, and are collectively known as the Children of the Woods. Now, each time you find one, they'll give Link a Koroks seed, and according to the game's description, if Link gathers a bunch of them, something might just happen. But what? Well, whatever it is, it's probably pretty important since we know the seeds go into the important items category on your inventory screen. And since they are, well, seeds, we're also pretty sure you'll be able to plant them somewhere and make something grow. I know, pretty shocking, right? But furthermore, we have a feeling the thing it grows into might just be a tree, given that in the Wind Waker, the Koroks had an annual tradition of planting trees around the world. In fact, could it possibly grow into the Great Tree, who watched over the Koroks in the Wind Waker? It's probably far-fetched, but hey, you never know. Anyways, even though we've only seen 5 Koroks in Breath of the Wild, there were 10 of them in the Wind Waker, which means we're pretty sure there's at least 5 more to find in this game too. And we wouldn't be surprised if they too are in the plateau. After all, 10's a nice round number, don't you think? And if that's the case, we can't help but wonder there might be Koroks to find in every region. It would seem a bit odd that they're mostly confined to the plateau after all. So is it possible that you might be able to do something with the seeds for every 10 that you find? Or will you have to collect them all for them to be useful? Now, one thing that's missing from the plateau, or really most anywhere else that we've seen, is any sign of civilized life. I mean, the only actual humanoid character we've seen besides Link is the old man. Now sure, there are hints of what used to be civilized life, like with the buildings left in ruin, but that's about it. Although there is one exception, the woodcutter's cabin. And not only is it in good condition, but it also appears to be inhabited based on the lit fire outside and the lit lantern near the entrance. So since there's no one else around, could this be the old man's primary residence? He does carry a very similar looking lantern around with him after all. Plus, we can even see him near the cabin in the trailer, using an axe to chop down a tree. Heck, he may have even used that very axe to build a cabin himself. Now, despite the mysterious lack of characters so far, Nintendo has confirmed the towns do in fact exist in the game. In fact, we may have seen proof of this way back in the original reveal trailer, where we not only see some intact buildings, but even several villagers out in the fields. Now granted, the game probably has changed to some degree since then, but it is possible we'll see something along those lines. And on top of that, we ourselves have heard from a reliable source that one of those towns is likely to be a Goron city, which makes sense given that they're rock creatures in a game with rock climbing. So we'd be very surprised if Link isn't able to climb some of those Gorons and maybe even hitch a free ride, especially given how big some of those Gorons can be. And of course, towns and cities in most open world games are generally ripe with side quests, and we don't expect Breath of the Wild to be any different. Especially based on the giant message here that flashes on screen when Link learns of the objective to head to the tower, which then gets marked complete when he finishes it. Why else would the game do that unless more quests are to be expected?
Alright, and that covers everything that we could find in that section of the analysis. Of course, there's more where that came from, so be sure to check out the full analysis to see everything we could find about Breath of the Wild.